at the Highlander Folk School relevant to the civil rights, and we started off just like a recap of our day talking to Ben Whitehouse, class of 99. Was working on a civil court case for the Highlander Folk School. Again, it was a school here to really inspire the consciousness of leaders and just really grassroots efforts, nonprofit. And what he found, and like the overarching theme that I found, was that even though it was doing good in the community, there was still a sense of institutional racism that they had to go through. So the school was shut down for small, almost negligible charges, but it's still just revealing that like dark nature of institutional racism amongst the community, even though they are inspiring the growth. And I feel like that's really relevant and pertinent to the civil rights discussion, showing how the hoops that blacks had to work through just for a cause that they believed in.
And then we continued on to Fisk University in Nashville and met with the director of the Fisk Jubilee Singers, Dr. Paul Kwame, and we learned about the importance of the Fisk Jubilee Singers as the first all-African-American choral group, a lot of the repertoire that they sang, why they initially didn't want to sing spirituals because it reminded them of a history of slavery, and then later on when they received a new director and why they decided to go back to singing spirituals and why it was important. It was just very interesting to see the university itself, to see the history, and just to see how emotional Dr. Kwame was speaking about how important this place is to African-American music and African-American spirituals and overall music history in general.
We set off on a walking tour of Nashville to start off with. Right around where we had lunch, we actually saw a Walgreens that was part of the sit-in movement in 1960. It is still a current Walgreens location. Only the lunch counter has been removed at this point. From there, we went on to the state capitol, was able to see some of the monuments that really surrounds the Capitol building, as well as the Tennessee War Memorial. From there, we went on to the Nashville Public Library.
During our time at this library, one of the things we visited was the civil rights section that the library had. And one of the things we started off with was watching kind of a documentary about the sit-ins in Nashville and getting to see how those went from just like a small, handful of people in the bottom of a church planning this to, 3,000 to 4,000 people being a part of the silent march that went across Nashville, to the mayor's house, fighting not only institutional racism but segregation, and really trying to desegregate not only lunch counters but a majority of the businesses in Tennessee, which was really a great experience to see, other than just reading it out of the textbook. One of the big feelings for me was probably awe. I was very much in awe of not only what happened in Tennessee, but the youth of the movement. The fact that youth was able to have such a huge impact in history is something that's very not only important to me, but it's very inspiring, because me being the same age as a lot of the people, especially like in the SNCC organization of the time, it really gets me motivated to fight my own battles of issues in society, and to really it makes me feel more accountable and like more responsible to really fight injustice. So that's just my personal opinion.
I guess one word that I'd really explain about my feelings today would be ominous, in the aspect that you sort of go through Nashville and you don't really see a lot of the sites. There's only one real site left that the sit-in movement really took a part of, and that was the Walgreens I was explaining a little bit. So it just sort of makes me feel that, this was such a huge movement. This was such a huge part of the overall progression of civil rights, but yet there's really not all that much there left to see in these cities that you don't really hear about quite as much, even though there's a huge aspect in Nashville with desegregation.
I agree with David's words. I would say I'm awestruck as well. I was really awestruck at the fact that the Fisk Jubilee Singers were able to really transform their school, really help it survive, and really help the whole musical world survive in a way with the impact they had for African-American music and the history of music in our country in general, and at the fact that they were really able to save their school. I mean, their school was not doing well financially, and they went out of their way to do a lot to save it through performances that they raised money through their performances, and I was just awestruck at the fact that music really helped save that school, and it still is such a rich part of the school's history, especially today. It's still a choral group that is continuing to build and will be performing for years to come, we hope.
So I'd say, much like David, my word would be less of an attitude, but more of inspiration or inspirational, specifically for going to Fisk and learning about the Jubilee Singers, seeing how people around my age were able to really band together and spread their culture nationally and internationally for a cause and for funding their school. And that extends just beyond the spectrum of Black music and Black culture to the site that we're currently at, the Highlander School. Inspirational in the regard that a nonprofit was bolstering up and teaching young people to come together cohesively and go out in the world and enact change. And we see that transcend from the Highlander School to the civil rights movement. So it's really, for me, just been inspirational to be in the same land or plane or area as great leaders in the emergence of a civil thought.